My first question to you is an obvious question. The protocol, which was essentially broken when you received the Indian Prime Minister at the airport, and that traditional welcome, it has been the biggest story in India and something that has been very viral as well. What is your thoughts about that essentially, and what is the idea behind it? I mean, to follow that Indian tradition.
Well, firstly, it's not an exclusive Indian tradition. We come from a Melanesian society where we welcome elders with respect and give them respect where it is deserved. This sort of welcome is not an ordinary welcome. It's not an everyday welcome to a guest or visitor. As I said, my own society here at Papua New Guinea has over 800 different languages. Inside, we have their own associated cultural practices. And in few of my cultures, it's an ancient culture where we do bestow that level of respect to important elders who do visit tribal land, who do visit our society. And for me, as Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea, acknowledging that Prime Minister Modi is a senior person, Prime Minister Modi leads the biggest democracy by population in a top 5 economy. He could have completely ignored Papua New Guinea and Pacific and passed us by. For him to choose to spend almost a day with us here in Port Moresby, visiting Port Moresby, and to meet the Pacific Island leaders where I would be co-hosting that meeting with him, I felt it proper for me to receive him myself at the airport and give respect to a senior global statesman who was visiting Papua New Guinea for the first time.
So you talked about the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the welcome that was given, but essentially it was a viral visual as well. What do you have to say about that as well? Because many people in India appreciated your gesture towards the Indian Prime Minister.
Well, he as I said earlier, he's a leader of his people. He's also a deeply spiritual man in his own faith. Papua New Guinea, we also spiritual people in our own faith. As part of our Christian heritage also, in the Christian worldview, we respect elders. There's a big Bible teaching to respect elders. You humble yourself in the face of others. And again, in my own cultural context and in my own spiritual worldview, as a Christian, giving respect to elder is important. And he was a senior statesman, not just a leader of India, but more importantly, as I pitched and the Pacific Island leaders view, that it cannot be just a two-way street in global geopolitics. India has emerged easily as the leader of the global south. Those who are developing nations, those who are emerging from the circles and bonds of colonialism. India himself, historically, they have dynasties after dynasties that were running in India and leading India for centuries. Yet the colonial past had made them become a colony of a colonial master. And out of those bondages, India has emerged very well to be the 4th biggest economy very, very soon, possibly 10th biggest economy in the horizon. And so he's standing as a leader of the global south. He's standing as a leader in G7 and G20 nations. He's hosting G20 this year. I just thought Papua New Guinea must give him respect in a special way, and they cannot be any higher than me on behalf of my 10 million plus people of our country, giving respect where it is due.
So you also said that India is the 3rd biggest voice in the global politics. If you can elaborate on those comments when you made at the FIPEC summit, because India, of course, plays an important role, we all understand, but you specifically said 3rd biggest power, essentially. So if you can talk about that.
Well, I'm the chief political planner of my own country. When I look into time, when I see into time, I see the emergence or re-emergence, I should put it, of India. India, before the Industrial Revolution, India was in itself a conglomerate of culture and nations with its own civilization. And in the modern world going forward into the future, India's own domestic ability for its own consumption and technology to fuel its own economy, but also its unique role in reaching out east, west, south, north, in my view, will place India in a position of dominance, a position of elevation, and as small nations like Papua New Guinea and many other Pacific Island nations and all the other developing nations, it goes well for us to relate to a third major force, in the global scene. And for the world of politics and balance out there, when we have many trading partners to relate with, when we have many governments to relate with, the world becomes a fair place for all instead of one or two dominant forces.
The FIPEC summit saw India reaching out to the Pacific countries. Papua New Guinea played a crucial role by hosting several countries of the Pacific, in fact, all the countries of the Pacific. What do you think was the key outcome of this meeting which took place in your country this week?
The outcome basically was multiple folds. Number one, it consolidated the Pacific family into a bond, and forever in the going forward into the future, the entire Pacific family of nations will remain one solid bloc. And this nations, small as they may be in landmass, but in space, they occupy substantial part of planet Earth. The entire Pacific Island nations put together, their waters cover 1/3 of world's airspace. They're a big ocean nation by sheer size of the territories they occupy. These ocean nations have come together, we bonded, we gelled, and we consolidated our own way, a new, better relationship with India. In Pacific, we define our West in looking towards India. The world may see the West from a different perspective and lens, but in the Pacific and Papua New Guinea leading the way, we look west to India. We look east to USA. We look north to China, Japan, Korea. Next week, the Pacific Island leaders with me, we visiting the Korean president in a conference he's hosting. That is our north. And of course, our south is Australia, New Zealand. And so we in a place where we relate east, west, south, north in our own dimension from our own perspective. And we see clearly India as our Western partner, not from the traditional Western concept where you have to the east and west, but from the Pacific concept. India is our west, our real west. We want to ramp up our own lateral conversations, not just in politics, but more importantly, in commerce, trade, business, and not just government to government level, but importantly for me and the Pacific, people to people engagements, and business to business engagements.
So essentially, this visit solidifies India and Pacific countries' relationship. But in the larger Pacific, the Pacific countries, the role they played, the geostrategic role they play, if you can talk about that, especially in the vision of the Indo-Pacific. Now, India backs the Indo-Pacific vision. How do you see Pacific countries playing an important role in this vision?
Well, Pacific country, our airspace and the sea space is quite substantial, as I did mention earlier. And so we are caught in the middle of the different blocks of nations, whether it is actually physical space on the world map or blocks of nations by ideology and worldviews. PNG and the Pacific is in the middle of this divide, this contest. The name Pacific in itself is a peaceful word. We want to live peacefully and coexist with all economies, all nations that we relate to. And with our own consolidation of relations with India gives us the third realm, as I said, third perspective, third bloc, third group of nations leadership and India has emerged in that space, so that we dilute the two-way street and congestion that is happening at the international politics level, where it's either the East and West divide from the traditional definition of East and West. Pacific is now contributing into this picture, led by PNG. In our own definition, there's a new West, and a new East, and a new North, and a new South. It should be seen in that clarity. We want to remain as Pacifics truly are. Friends to all, enemies to none. Let's not talk about military. Let's not talk about fighting. Let's not talk about war. Let's talk about lifting the lives of every ordinary citizens of planet Earth. We are one village. We are one planet. We occupy one sea. We occupy one ozone layer that keeps the blanket of humanity together on Mother Earth. That is the contribution small nations like Pacific nations want to play in the global conversations. There is no room for war and talk about war and territorial contest. Respecting territories we have today, work the space of economy, work the space of keeping Mother Earth hospitable and livable for not just us, but more importantly, children who will come after us. Because Pacific nations speak from an existential threat that is facing us. Sea level rise, climate change is giving huge threat to small island states. And we come on the table from this existential threat to beg and speak to big global leaders. Hear the small people, hear the small nations. As we all share in this space together and we live together. And for PNG and Pacific, we see India as a strong, good partner to bring our advocacies to G7, G20, to the industrialized nations, and to the world family of nations in conversations that is really important and closer to our heart, especially those existential issues that face us, like sea level rise and climate change.
I believe one of the key announcements made by the outcomes of the FIPEC was the establishment of a Jaipur limb in Papua New Guinea. How do you see this announcement? Because India has made other announcements for other Pacific countries as well, so that these countries can be regional hubs.
Siddhant, India, out of these conversations, they made few commitments to continue the Japa food camps and few other, supply kidney dialysis units, provision of sea ambulances, and ensuring that we have affordable, reliable, quality medicines, establishment of emergency helplines, development of SME for our small island states, as well as ensuring that we have access to solar power system. Something that I recommended very closely was for those who have big carbon footprints on face of planet Earth, and India is also one of them. The easiest space to assist small island states would be finding cheaper, clean, green energy sort of solution to allow for cheap energy in small island states. India has made commitment into that space. India also has provided a commitment to having desalination units to small island states who are exposed to sea level rise and no availability of clean water. And of course, India has announced for special scholarship for high-tech training for over 1,000 students to go back train there, and a special heart facility in Fiji. And in Papua New Guinea, we already have an ICT center that at our University of Papua New Guinea that will be continued in terms of their support for that school. So they've announced various other programs at a country level and together as for the region. But I'm not looking for me personally, I'm not looking into this space only. I'm happy that our core substantial issues in the Pacific will be elevated by a genuine partner from away from the common partners we have who sometimes hear our issues and raise them. We now have India who's coming closer to the Pacific, who will be able to advocate for small island states and communities at the relevant forums where Prime Minister Modi will sit in.
So are you also looking at some kind of India, Australia, and of course Papua New Guinea trilateral collaboration on infrastructure in your country?
Not that the immediate states, Papua New Guinea, from my perspective, I want to go bilateral in a big way, one-on-one.
Uh-huh.
I
So,
have I have my relationship with Australia that I'm fine with this. We're expanding in that space. I'm now expanding directly one-on-one with USA. I will have one-on-one deeper commitment with India, and we work that space. We have one-on-one with China. We have one-on-one with South Korea. We have one-on-one with Japan, without compromising our principles and their principles. We want to relate with all nations who want to relate with us. So, not necessarily having a trilateral with Australia. At the moment, there is no need for that. If the need emerges, we look into this space. But right now, PNG's definition of West is India.
Sir, you
West.
also pointed out during your address the impact of the Russia-Ukraine conflict on your country. If you can elaborate for our viewers the impact of the conflict on your country in terms of the inflationary pressure your country is facing, and perhaps also talk about the region as well.
I was using that as a case in point to point out that, politics or geopolitics or conflict elsewhere has an impact on economies globally. And we import the cost of fuel rise, for instance, to our local economies. The fuel that is being imported into the Pacific Island countries to ensure that they have electricity supply has the price of that inflation cost as a result of the war in Ukraine. That was just an example of the decisions made to go to war that has an impact on economies elsewhere. They got no direct cost to the war that is taking place, but they're living with the burden of the cost of living that has arose as a result of decisions that has taken place by leaders elsewhere. That indicates to us the world is a global village. We live in one village, one economy that is interlinked. Our decisions as leaders has a global impact. And so in Pacific, we want the world to be a peaceful place. We want our part of the world, the Pacific, to remain a peaceful place going forward into the future. Whether you India, China, Australia, Japan, USA, you come into the Pacific, let's live peacefully, let's respect each other's sovereignty, let's coexist, let's work to live the lives of our people who we represent as leaders. And India's got 1.4 billion people to look after. They need new place for investment and trade. Papua New Guinea and Pacific is a place where you could harvest fish. We got big ocean that has fish and marine resources. PNG has big land for agriculture. PNG has produces like oil, gold, gas, produce to find export, and coffee and agricultural produces to send back and export back to India and elsewhere. And so the contribution Pacific Island nations want to give to bigger nations like India, China, USA, and others. Let's respect each other, coexist. Talk about trade, commerce, technology, science, medicine, education to help the world live peacefully, then talk about stress and fight and all the border issues.
Sir, this week also saw a pact being signed with the Americans, the Papua New Guinea US pact. If you can talk about that, do you think that it will promote stability in the region?
For us, Papua New Guinea, we've had defense corporations with almost all nations we have bilateral relationship with, and that includes USA, that includes China, that includes Japan, that includes Australia, Indonesia, as well as Philippines and India. Under an Act of Parliament we have since 1975 when we became independent, all bilateral partners and their militaries can visit our country. It's called Visiting Forces Act of 1975. And under that law, we have developed specific bilateral relationships with all militaries we engage upon. From USA, we operated under what was called Status of Force Agreement of 1989. We are now going directly with the defense cooperation with them. It offends no other relationship we have with every other nation. Every other nation have our own peculiar aspects of relationship. With US, we're having now the specific defense cooperation agreement that elevates it to a relationship with US instead of a combined shared relationship with other nations of similar value and similar military arrangements. We're now having this specific relation with USA, just like we have specific military corporations with Australia and Indonesia and other nations. We're now having this specific one with USA. It will not offend any other nations. We relate with them in their own peculiar way as we relate with USA also.
Are you looking at similar defense pacts with India?
As we advance into the future, it's a matter of process and time. Process, time, comfort, and law. As relationships expand and exist, it's a work in progress for us. But all nations have the peculiar relationship with Papua New Guinea in their own context.
So my final question to you is the Chinese role in the Pacific. How do you see China's role in Pacific, bilateral relationship with your country as well? Because in the region, many countries don't have a very positive view about China, whether it's in India, whether it's in Australia.
Well, different countries have different views on each other. Papua New Guinea has a deep and friendly relations with China that I must admit and indicate to you and for your audience. We don't intend to compromise that relationship with China. Likewise, I want to appreciate the United States of America when we signed the DCA. The DCA doesn't prohibit us from relating with China or any other nation, India included. They give respect to our independence and to our freedom of association with every other nation we relate with. And as far as Papua New Guinea is concerned, China up to today has not offended our sovereignty. They respect our total sovereignty in their response to other public media commentaries. As far as the DCA was concerned, they said it's PNG's sovereign choice to relate to all nations. They have no issue with us in our relationship or deeper relation with USA in as far as this signing is concerned. We relate with China big time. In fact, as I speak today, China is the biggest importer of PNG's produce. China, Japan, India, and other nations, Korea, that I'm visiting in the next 2 days' time. I'll be visiting Korea. They're all big partners to Papua New Guinea. And as far as Papua New Guinea is concerned, China, Japan, Korea is my north. I see that in that context. I don't see China on its own. I don't see Japan on its own. I don't see Korea on its own. As a policy planner for my country, I see PNG's north as China, Japan, Korea, Philippines. I see PNG's west as Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and close by India. And I see my east as USA. In the context of seeing my east right through USA and my Pacific, we have embraced the DCA to protect the waters of Pacific, the waters of Papua New Guinea, to ensure that we don't have any illegal movements in our waters. My waters are faced with so much illegal fishing. I want to eliminate illegal fishing from my waters, and this is one of the main reasons why we're signing those specific defense corporations.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for speaking to WION. Thank you, sir.
God bless. God bless.